The science test is probably the most unusual part of the ACT. I don't know about you, but when I hear science, I start getting flashbacks to physics, start thinking about doing complicated calculations and memorizing lots of formulas. Well, good news. There's none of that here. The science test is really a reading test, where every single passage is about science. The science test will give you 35 minutes to answer 40 multiple-choice questions, spread out over the course of 7 passages. The passages break down to 3 general categories, which we here at the Princeton Review call charts and graphs, experiments, and fighting scientists. So what do these passages look like? The first kind of passage is called charts and graphs. There'll be 3 of these passages with 5 questions each for a total of 15 questions. These passages will present you with diagrams or pictures or tables and ask you questions about how to interpret them. The next kind of passage is experiments. There'll be 3 of these passages with 6 questions each for a total of 18 questions. Experiments passages present you with the results of several experiments and ask you to interpret the data. The last kind of passage is called fighting scientists. There'll only be one of this kind of passage and it'll have 7 questions. Fighting scientist passages usually present you with 2 or 3 different perspectives on an issue. Sometimes the issue is still being debated, such as are viruses alive? Sometimes it's already been decided, such as what is fire? Questions in fighting scientist passages will ask you to do things such as interpret each side's perspective or find what kind of information would reconcile the different perspectives. Now, fighting scientist passages are among the most difficult in the science test, so you may want to consider saving them for last. Now that we know what the passages look like, let's take a look at the questions. Questions in the science reasoning test fall into one of 3 general categories: understanding, analysis, and generalization. Understanding questions are just like the ones in the reading test. They ask you to recognize paraphrases of fact from the passage. Analysis questions want you to get deep. They ask you to make predictions or interpretations of the experiments. Generalization questions are about the big picture. These would ask you about the broader implications of a scientific finding. Okay, so now we know what the questions look like. How should we approach them? Here at the Princeton Review, we have a 4-step process for tackling even the trickiest science passage. Step 1, work the passage. Look, before you even think about going to those questions, you're going to have to find out what information is important and what's not. This means skim the passage, look for information, underline key terms. If you're dealing with the charts and graphs passage, then you're going to want to make sure you carefully analyze those charts and graphs to find out what information they're displaying. Step 2, look at each question and identify its type. As you tackle each question, you have to figure out whether the question is an understanding, an analysis, or a generalization question. Remember, these questions are asking for different things, therefore you have to approach them in different ways. Step 3, ballpark. Lots of times science questions will ask you to perform quick little calculations. Now these calculations are so simple and straightforward that you won't need a calculator and you can use ballparking to find the right answer. And that's good, because you can't use a calculator on the science test. Step 4, process of elimination. As with all of the other parts of the ACT, even if you can't find the right answer, get rid of as many wrong ones as you can and make a guess. Okay, let's recap. Remember to follow the 4-step process. Step 1, work the passage. Step 2, identify the question type. Step 3, ballpark. Step 4, process of elimination. Look, the ACT is trying to scare you off with the science test. But as we've seen, there's nothing on the science test that you haven't seen in high school, and the science actually has a lot in common with the reading test.